We are live.
This is Literary Roadhouse, one short story once a week. I'm Andy.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Anais.
This week we are reading The Demon Lover, a short story by Elizabeth Bowen. In this, we follow Kathleen, who's come home from the country to her London house in order to pick up a few things to bring back to her family. Inside her shuttered and empty house, she finds a letter addressed to her with today's date. But the caretaker's away on holiday, and even if he weren't, he would have sent it ahead to her instead of leaving it in the empty house. She eventually reads the letter, which references a promise she made to her old fiancé, who went to war and never came home 25 years ago, and says that she could expect him at the hour arranged. With mounting dread, she reflects back on her time with this man as well as the course of her life, and finally decides the best thing to do is to gather the things she came for and get back to her family in the country before any more hours happen. In a near panic, she exits the house, gets into a taxi. As the taxi starts to drive away without any instruction, the clock strikes 7. She sees the face of the driver and begins to scream.
Woo! That's a good summary.
Yeah.
For those who aren't watching YouTube, which is most people, Andy's face throughout that is best described as sarcastic. He has a sarcastic expression throughout the entire summary.
Yeah.
Why
To be
is that,
fair,
Andy?
well, that's a good way to describe my face at any point in time. But in this specific instance, it's just, I don't know. This could have been any story. I don't know what the point of this was. I don't know what message they're trying to get across. It's just, oh, the thing you're trying to run away from was in the place you ran to. Spooky. I don't know.
Okay.
What do you guys think?
You could have used that as a summary. Very good.
What do you think, Gerald?
Well, as a story, I quite enjoyed it. I like a bit of spook every now and again. That's quite good. I didn't think much of the writing, to be honest, and she's a proper writer and everything, but there were some dodgy bits in there that you just think made it seem more like an amateur author than the proper professional one. And there's it was sort of written in a like an oldie worldy type of way, which was okay, but I don't know. I'm with Andy. It's a sort of it's a meh story, I think.
So I'm going to push back on you guys a little bit. I'm not going to say this was one of my favorite stories ever. No, but Gerald, when you say that there's something oldie worldly about it, yeah. And Andy was saying, what's the point? What's the message? Also good questions. And I think what is coming across is this is a older style of story where you have to work a lot harder to figure out what the story is getting at. And it may not necessarily have a very sharp point. So like we've read some of these in the podcast, but it's been several months before we've had one of these stories where it feels very like, what? Why? Huh? Nothing like, but as you start digging, you start to discover, oh, okay, there's all these other things here that it's, referencing or alluding to. So the big thing here, I think that you can't forget is she is going back to her house that's been, that they have evacuated, that's slightly bombed out in an area of Kensington in World War II that has been, the Blitz has come through. And when you keep that in mind, some of the other stuff starts to fall into place a little bit. And some of the writing that I think you described as amateurish, Gerald, I think it's actually it's like these kind of overwrought descriptions, but there are subtleties in them that like point you in a different direction. Like, I don't want to be the only one monologuing about this, but does the fact that it happens during World War II mean anything to you guys?
I don't. Nothing particular, other than no, nothing particular.
Andy? Yeah. No?
I certainly noticed it happened during World War II, and I
Okay.
thought, oh,
And,
that's neat.
and the promise with her fiance was during World War One.
Right.
So here's a woman who has lived through 2 world wars. And there are some hints in the way that things are described throughout the story that lead me to believe there's no demon. It's her brain, her mind's coming untethered. That's what I think's actually happening. That's my
Like
twist.
she's got like a PTSDs.
Yeah, you know the section. Did you have a hard time following the section where she's describing the promise that happened 25 years ago, and there's a lot of tense issues?
Yeah.
That I think the
Yeah.
tense issues are super intentional. Super intentional. Yeah, that's my read of it. Because
Okay.
remember when she first gets the letter, she's annoyed by it. She isn't angry, right? She hasn't read it yet. She just goes upstairs to do her thing. It's not until she reads it, she remembers it. And then she has this sort of fracturing between the Kathleen of then and the Kathleen of now are occurring at the same time. Like these things are being overlapped. She's lived through 2 world wars that feel very similar. And there's a way in which like there were some of the other lines. Oh, that if she doesn't look at the letter, it won't be there. There's like all these little like clues that there's something otherworldly here, that she's in some sort of memory. Like when she comes back into the house, it's described in kind of wounded terms. There's a bruise on the wallpaper. There's claw marks on the floor, right? All of the descriptions are like wound related, and that there's no dust there because no dust is getting in, but it still has this sort of feeling of like memory gone cold. There's like a way in which her being here in this particular space is a revisiting of her past, and the way that it's all getting layered together, and like the injuries that have happened to her psyche over time. I don't know. I got it more on my second read through. I'm not gonna lie. Like the first read through, I was like a little disappointed, and then on my second, I'm like, wait, this is interesting. Everything's a bruise and a wound in this room. Oh, this is interesting. There's a way in which she sort of knows that this is fake. You know what I mean? This is only happening when she comes to this house. Like, she didn't make that promise while she was living in this house. She was living in her parents' house when she was like 19 years old. So why is it happening in this house now? Why 25 years? The promise wasn't 25 years. What's this about the arranged hour? The promise she makes is so vague. When you go back in time, she's never like, this is the promise I made to my fiance. There is no promise. That's why everything's vague. That's why she doesn't remember the face. That guy's dead. That man died in the war. You know, like I think there's just a sense of, I think it's about that. I think it's about the trauma of 2 world wars on England. That's my takeaway.
Well,
I don't think I agree with that. Actually.
Okay.
Ooh,
All right.
No, I because yes, I mean there was just looking at it now. There was a promise, not that she made, but he says because the tense thing didn't throw me until because I had it in a text document, and then I separated the sort of flashback that starts the young girl talking to the soldier in the garden. So that's the flashback that she has. And then in that flashback, he says, I shall be with you, he said, sooner or later. You won't forget that. You need do nothing but wait. And so there was a sort of promise, a sort of, it was an implied promise. But I get the feeling that it's. I mean, the points that I made earlier about the writing. There was a sentence that says blah 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 blah. So his negligence in the manner of this letter, leaving it to wait in the dusk and the dust, annoyed her. Annoyed, she picked up the letter. I thought, oh, that's a bit clumsy. I could see no point for that. And then when she's in the taxi at the end. It's just sentence constructing. The driver braked to what was almost a stop, turned round and slid the glass panel back. The jolt of this flung Mrs. Drover forward. No, the jolt of the braking flung her forward, not the sliding of the glass panel. So I just thought, that's just weird. That's not very well written. So that sort of coloured my view of the rest of the story. So that's sort of why I said, yeah.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is about her psyche coming undone. You can still have a literal demon, pact, possession, occult story layered on top, where like where the demon possession occult story is a metaphor for the way that um that England, in a greater sense, was sort of possessed by these horrible things over the course of two world wars. Like there is a certain, you know, yeah, like there's just overwhelming force that you can't escape. 25 years later, you're still back here. It feels like a repetition.
Well,
I don't know, because in the First World War there wasn't much impact upon the England as a country within itself, that other than the fact that people went away, and it was very much a war fought on foreign soil. In the Second World War, that was very different, and the war came to us in the Blitz and in things like that. So we were impacted. So I think, to me, the wars are sufficiently different for them not to be, because she I don't think she was traumatized by the First World War thing. I think
Right, which is what you're saying. The First World War wasn't as traumatizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't see why she would have PTSD, especially since they were affluent enough to be able to move away to the country and leave their house in London, Knightsbridge no less, to get away from the possibility of bombing by the Germans. So I don't know. I remain to be convinced.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the what you're saying is true. Like the First World War wasn't as traumatic for those back home as the second, but that's the same is true for her. The first thing, she felt an unease about him. It was painful in her palm, right? He's leaving the scar. She's getting the scar for the rest of her life from that first one, but it isn't as traumatizing. She moves on, and then the second one's a lot worse. Andy, anything to add?
Well, I mean, that makes a lot more sense than my reading, which was this guy makes her promise to wait for him for 25 years at 7 p.m. and then goes to war, deserts, fakes his death, stalks her for 25 years, and then sneaks out of her basement just before she leaves to get into a taxi cab.
That unrealisticness is why I keep saying it's either all in her head or it is supernatural, but the supernatural is something she's carrying with her. Like she's been possessed since then. So there could be something occult, but it's definitely coming from her and it's triggering now in this house. There isn't someone in the basement, right? That's my read.
But here's what I don't know. The whole part in the basement is told to us by the narrator. She heard nothing, but while she was hearing nothing, the passé air of the staircase was disturbed by a draft that traveled up to her face. It emanated from the basement. Down there, a door or window was being opened by someone who chose this moment to leave the house.
Or it's a drafty old house that's cracked from bombs.
No, but like, it's not like, oh, she thought there was a person. Like, no, the narrator's telling us, hey, someone just left the basement.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
It's a weird turn.
It is a weird turn, but I just feel like, because it even seems like coming to this house was a last minute decision. So either way, she's carrying this with her. Like even if she was in the house in the country, would it have happened there? Do you get what I'm saying? Like I don't think the promise was meet at this house that you didn't even know you were going to live in, right? You know what I'm saying? Like she's been carrying this with her, even if it's a cult. It would have happened anywhere. It could have happened while she's shopping, if that's what she was doing at 7. You know what I'm saying? In fact, it happens in a taxi. Yeah. And the fact that it seems to be coming from her, haunting her, no matter where she is at 7 p.m., whether she's in the house or in the taxi or out in the country or shopping, that's why I'm saying I think it's a little bit about the psyche of, this woman who has lived through 2 world wars while still being a cult. Like, I think you can do both things. This is that older style storytelling where there is literally a demon but it's not about the demon. Or like, like Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings, and it's like, it's literally elves, but also it's actually a World War One, right? Like, that whole thing where like, it's like a parallel. Like, yes, we have tree ants, but also it's a metaphor for that. I think that's what's happening here.
See, I don't think that paragraph where the narrator says, "Hey, by the way, someone's sneaking out of the basement." I don't know. It completely undermined the whole demon angle. I would have preferred there to be a demon, but a third-person narrator told me.
Why can't the person leaving the basement be the demon?
Why would a demon have to sneak out of the basement?
We don't know how this demon functions. Everything is vague as hell. Everything is super vague. The only thing that's not vague is how spooky everything looks. The parapets and the towers as the sun is setting. There's a cat, which is like the most mysterious of small critters.
The spookiest of all animals.
The spookiest. Who just, yeah. She doesn't say it, does that, but like we all heard it. It's like the spookiest setting.
It was a pretty spooky cat. It was like winding through a staircase. That's, probably the spookiest thing a cat can do.
Yeah. So yeah, it's written in a very spooky way, but keeps all the details of the actual spookiness vague. That has to be deliberate. Like, it doesn't matter how amateur of a writer you are. In fact, the most amateur of writers tend to box themselves in by trying to define every single aspect of a ghost or a demon up front, right? Like, they will info dump like, and this is how it works, and this is what the promise was, and this is how, right? This author very cleverly goes, I'm not going to even touch any of that, and we're just going to have it happen no matter what.
Yeah, but what? I don't know.
Yeah,
what kind of promise would it have had to be with the facts we know? A goofy promise. Right,
but it's not. The promise is just, I'm going to wait for you and marry you. That's it. Like, that's how vague it is. And the fact that it's happening 25 years later, I don't think a 19-year-old is promising to marry someone in 25 years. That's not the promise, right?
At 7 p.m.
At 7 p.m. specifically. Right. The promise isn't specific. It's just, I'm going to be with you. And now randomly 25 years later, it's happening at this house. That's why I'm saying she's carrying it with her. It's going to trigger what it's going to trigger.
All right.
It's funny. For some reason, even having read it twice or three times, I didn't catch this sentence that Andy mentioned. Down there, a door or window is being opened by someone who chose this moment to leave the house. Spookily, I haven't read that before. So by some strange means, that sentence has been inserted into the story while I wasn't looking. Now that's dead spooky. But to Andy's point, it says a door or window was being opened by someone. If the narrator was telling us something, they would say it was a door or window being opened. Or the writer would say, as if a door or window was being opened. So it's a very strange way of writing it, that it's a definitive statement by the narrator, and yet they're not definitive about what was being opened. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. It's weird.
It's weird.
It is.
It is apparently one of Elizabeth Bowen's most anthologized stories. It's considered one of her greatest. Yeah, I did a little bit of research. Like, this is considered like one of her best. Mm-hmm.
Huh. Well, egg on my face, I guess.
I think it's because of the World War thing. I think it's because of the World War thing. I really think that's. I mean,
that's really the only. That's the only other theme in this, so that's got to make sense on some level.
It's that, and also because it's so vague, you constantly have to ask, is the letter real? Did she imagine it? Is there actually a demon? Is she just crazy? Those questions that never get answered, I think, is also part of the fun of it.
Well, let's put fun in quotes.
I think our expectations as readers have evolved over time, because I know we've read stories that are older that do this a lot. Like, we've read stories on this podcast that love to do this. Just like, is it this or this? No one knows. Oh my God, amazing storytelling. Like, that's right. Like, that's the twist. So we don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like I don't care. Yeah, whether it's a demon or a weirdo guy or what, like it, I don't know.
Or her own mind.
Yeah, whatever it was doing, it didn't do it well enough to make me intrigued in the mystery of it.
But I don't think it's doing it intentionally. You keep saying whatever it was doing. I think there is an old style of writing that we don't see as much of anymore, where the author doesn't have that question answered even for themselves. They're just
Oh.
putting something out there for people to interpret, and that interpretation is the fun. It's like a play between what the author has written and what people get out of it, where the author doesn't actually have any stake in what people get out of it.
But
That is-
then the author needs to, because I get the feeling the author doesn't know what's going on here either. I just think you must be able to discuss something or read something, some analysis, and think, that's what the story is. And in this, I don't think we can. I don't think it makes much sense, and I don't think you can draw it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking for a sort of definitive explanation, whether it be
Right.
supernatural or whether it be, I don't mind it being supernatural. I don't mind it being a spooky story. But I'd like to know what it is.
That's
And-
what I'm
and
saying.
this-
That's the newer
Yeah.
style. So contrast this with last week's story. We did poetry by Greg Jackson, and there was that interview where Greg Jackson's telling you absolutely everything he meant with everything that he put in there, right? It's completely different style of writing, where I think this older style, you're 100% right. I would bet that the author did not write this with an intention. Like, she's just first of all, this idea of a girl making a pact with a demon that's, vaguely tied to like marriage or sex or something like that is a recurring thing. Like that's almost like tropified in a lot of literature. Like, that's a story that gets retold, and she's putting it now in a World War II context, or in both World Wars context, and keeping things deliberately vague enough where, as readers, we start pulling stuff out of it, and she's cool with all the interpretations, all of them equally likely. That's an older style that we don't see as much anymore. Now we have Greg Jackson telling the New Yorker everything he meant.
Well,
Okay.
I think that's a good thing. We moved away from this older
That we
style
don't
for a
know.
reason.
Yeah. Yes.
I think
I'm with Andy.
Yeah,
here.
I think this is probably not my favorite example of this, but I should go back into our archives and see if I can find, like, there was, and maybe I'll like reshare it with our throwback episodes, which I kind of stopped doing and I should start again. But find one where it does this and we liked it. I know we've read a few. I think the problem with this one, maybe where we don't like it, is the ending feels so unsatisfying for me. The ending's
Yeah.
the least satisfying part of the story. Everything building up to it, I'm intrigued enough to see what happens, and I'm like, really?
I mean, it was definitely building something.
Yeah, I think she did that well, and I think it's quite interesting that in the flashback scene, it starts off by saying the young girl talking to the soldier in the garden had not ever completely seen his face, which is sort of quite strange and quite interesting. And yet in the taxi, by whatever means, she jolts forward, and then maybe she doesn't recognize through aperture, not 6 inches between a rainbow and eternity, eye to eye. It's like, would she recognize him? I don't know. I'm not. I'm just waffling here.
Well, that's the occult supernatural part. She recognizes him when she sees him. And she goes,
Yep.
Yep.
This is the guy.
Right. That's the occult part.
Like, there was something somewhere like about his eyes, right? She knew his eyes. I don't know.
Yeah. So I feel like I don't have that much more to say because Gerald and I just recorded Black Leopard, Red Wolf, and that fried my brain. So, like, I've gotten about as much as I can get.
Well, got
Tapped out.
no more critical input to give.
I'll say this: the the part about the ending that I found especially disappointing is that it was such a tropey thing to do. Like, okay, I'll escape from, whatever it is, the prophecy or the thing I'm running from. Whatever I do to evade the thing I'm trying to avoid is what brings it about. Is like, yeah, obviously whatever you do is going to bring it about. That happens 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And we've discussed stories before where they're like, oh yeah, it did this completely predictable tropey thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I was fine with it because that wasn't like the selling point. That was like a sub layer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. That happened with our discussion of Bread and Wine, where it's like, oh, of course, the cyborg clone, whatever, the clones ate their creator 100% of the time. That's not eating, but they're the bad guys 100% of the time.
Right.
But it didn't matter because there was enough other stuff going on to latch onto. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like just having the thing you're doing to avoid the thing you don't want to happen cause the thing you don't want to happen on its own isn't bad, but you better give me something else to stick my teeth into.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'm not saying I love the story. Yeah. I'm just saying I think there's other stuff going on, but yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else to add, Gerald?
No.
I'm cool with this being a short podcast because it's a short story and it's very straightforward.
Very straightforward.
Yeah. Wasn't it the Skylight Room that did something similar to this? No, it was the Starman. Never mind. The Starman was the doctor.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was Dr. Starman.
Yeah. 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 I don't really have much else to say because I think that's it. Like just occult or psyche. That's it. I was like, oh my God.
Well, you're discounting the very real possibility of a 25-year stalker faking his death for some reason, which is what I personally think happened.
Yeah, that's super crazy, but you never know.
I mean, obviously, a demon is more likely, but
yeah, and would he didn't invite her down to the house, did he? Or didn't he didn't precipitate the journey down to the house? She made it on her own.
That's how closely he's been stalking her.
Well, maybe he's been living in the basement all this time, and after 25 years, hooray, she's come back. Now I can implement that sneaky plan I've had to frighten her to death or something.
She wasn't living in this house 25 years ago, though. That's the best part.
yeah, there is that, yes.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he just moved in once they moved out. He's like, eventually she'll return, and then...
What a long con. And then he has to hear her rattling with the door, and he quickly writes down the note and drops it on the table and scurries away.
Well, he had to date the note. He had the letter written.
He just had to date it. Yeah.
Date on it. Yeah.
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 Shall we do ratings?
Yeah. Let's shall.
Yeah. Why not? It's what we do, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'll give it a 4 because I quite liked it.
Okay, and I feel bad because I was going to give it beneath a 4. I was going 3.5, but maybe I'll bump up to a 4. But yeah.
Well, I'm going to give it a 2.
Wow.
Whoa.
Oh, that's fine.
Good.
That's fine
because it has words.
Yeah, words didn't care for him. That's not my thing.
Yeah. It's either 3.5 or 4 for me. Basically the same thing.
Well, you got to pick one.
Yeah.
I think I've had other stories I liked better that were 4, so it's got to be a 3.5.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is it game time? What are we all submitting?
Well, I shall submit again 3 Friends in a Hammock by April Ayres Lawson.
Okay. And I'm submitting The Palm Tree Bandit by Nnedi Okorafor.
Ooh. Mm-hmm. So, this game is either going to make sense and work as intended, or not do that.
Cool. I love those options. I feel like those options are true for anything in life. So
yeah, I mean, that is true. but they're especially
Do
true
we have
this
to
time.
choose? Is that the game?
So, in the interest of spooky stories, I have prepared a list of the titles of several horror movies
Mm-hmm.
Ooh,
and the descriptions of several horror movies.
Mm.
And I would like you two to match the description with the title.
Oh, that's fun. How are we gonna do this
Ooh.
audio? Yeah.
Well, if this were more rigorous, I would do a bunch of stuff, but I will give you the titles and I'll read one description. You guys will each pick one and I'll tell you who got it right or wrong.
Okay. Can you copy and paste the titles in Slack just so we can have
Yeah.
a visual reminder?
That's a good reminder. Here we are. Titles.
got that.
They are Evil Dead, Cabin in the
Okay.
Woods, Terminal Invasion, The Woods, Alien Apocalypse, Pitch Black, Bubba Hotep.
Okay.
Crikey.
So the first one is a plucky group of teens go to a cabin in the woods where they accidentally allow a passage from the Necronomicon Ex Mortis to be read aloud, awakening an ancient evil. Gerald? What movie does that sound like?
That sounds like The Woods.
An ace?
He already guessed the woods, so I guess Cabin in the Woods. I was gonna guess.
Ah, you're both incredibly wrong. That's
Oh.
Evil Dead.
It is?
It is.
Okay. We're both
Mhm.
wrong.
So,
Okay.
number 2. A plucky Elvis Presley and John F. Kennedy notice something is killing off people in the retirement home where they live and join forces to stop it.
Who are the two actors?
They're not actors, they're
Oh.
characters.
Oh, characters. Who are the characters?
Elvis Presley and John F. Kennedy,
Mm. Is this
the
Bubba
former
Hotep?
president. Gerald?
Yeah, I would say that too. So instead I will say Terminal Invasion.
It is actually Bubba Hotep.
Woo!
Mm.
Okay. It sounded silly, so.
Yeah. A plucky osteopath returns home after traveling abroad to find his country has been invaded by a foreign power, slavery to find the president and rally a rebellion.
That's got to be Terminal Invasion.
Yeah,
An
that
ace?
was my guess is also Terminal Invasion, but I guess I'll go with Pitch Black just in case.
That is actually Alien Apocalypse.
I was gonna
No.
say Alien Apocalypse until you came to the last bit. Up until like this, what was the last line you said? That threw me off. I don't know. The last line threw me off. Like it sounds
He
like
escaped
Alien.
slavery to find the president and rally a rebellion.
The president part. I'm like, I don't remember president stuff. That's Alien Apocalypse. Like that part I didn't. Okay. All the beginning, the
Okay.
osteopath and everything else.
A plucky
Wow.
convicted murderer has to earn the trust of his plucky group while they try to come together to fight off shape-shifting alien creatures.
Pitch Black.
Gerald?
I'll do Terminal Invasion.
That is Terminal Invasion.
We're tied now.
They're in an airport
I was going to
terminal.
go Pitch Black too.
That's the joke.
Oh.
Pitch
Okay.
Black's a different convicted killer, and those aliens do not shapeshift.
Oh.
Of course.
Of course.
Here's my last one. A plucky girl is sent to a boarding school with a dark secret.
The Woods.
Gerald?
I think so, but I'll go Alien Apocalypse.
We already did
It
that.
is The Woods.
It's The Woods.
Really? Well done, Annalise.
So- Looks like Annie's wins. Would you like to hear the tiebreaker question?
Yes.
What actor plays a pivotal role in each of these films?
What?
Bruce Campbell.
Yeah, obviously it's Bruce Campbell.
Yeah.
These are all classics of horror cinema.
So I don't know any of these, but what I do know is that Andy is a huge Bruce Campbell fan to the point of having tattoos in his honor and meeting him at several conventions. And only one out of those, I don't know how many times you didn't freeze.
7 times.
7 times, and only one out of 7 times you were able to speak, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was great. It made my day.
Yeah.
Every other
So-
time I completely
What?
froze up.
Anytime Andy wants you to guess an actor, you just say Bruce Campbell and you're right every time. Unless the question is worst actor ever, then it's not. Well, actually, it might still be
Well,
Bruce Campbell.
yeah, it could be.
It's still Bruce Campbell. Yeah. He's not good, but he's great. Yeah.
It's true.
So I got it just from knowing Andy. Okay.
Yes.
Well, you had already won, but you would have won
Yeah.
the tiebreaker.
Yes. Bruce Campbell. All right. So the Palm Tree Band. Oh, next week we're reading The Palm Tree Bandit by Nnedi Okorafor. Hope I'm saying that right. But before you go, leave us a mysterious letter with your thoughts on the story in our Facebook group, The Literary Roadhouse Readers, or on Twitter @LitRoadhouse, or our website, literaryroadhouse.com. Wish you could spend more time with demons and the women possessed by them? Join the Literary Roadhouse Book Club, where we discuss a novel each month. And lastly, this story reminded us the importance of making good on your promises. We promised you more literary shows, support our literary expansion, and podcast expenses at patreon.com/literary roadhouse. Every bit helps. As always, share this podcast with the demon you love. Until next time, read a good story.
Yay.
Yay!